What's going on, YouTube? Well, we're going to look at some cars today, of course. Hot Wheels. We got Hot Wheels. I don't even think I have Matchbox in this roundup. We got to get caught up on our quarter two 2020. We're deep into it. And a lot of cool new castings, a couple of repeats that we'll share, and a couple main lines, a couple noteworthy main lines made it to the. This is going to make it to the screen this time. Let's take a look. Well, this is a vehicle that is really neat, and it's hard to find one in real life. I couldn't believe they were actually going to cast it. I only knew about this like maybe a month ago, and it fell off my radar. Of course, there's so many cars that you see when you watch everybody say, okay, this car is going to be produced, this car is going to be produced, this truck, this Jeep. Your mind just keeps going over and over again. What do you want? What are you going to add to the collection? As most collectors have that debate. It kind of makes it fun for me. I know some people can go nuts with the decisions, but I like being picky. So what am I alluding to? Well, this is a vehicle, again, in real life, hard to find. They're really cool. Talking about this. I found this on the pegs. Look at this thing. Kia GT Stinger. This is a 2019 version. They got the taillight and headlight done. They got the Kia badge, and they got that grill that they do, so it's hollow. Mainline wheels. They do a wheel like that, so it kind of was a good choice. The windshield carried into the sunroof. It looks a little silly, but I get that. If you were to paint this real black, gloss black, it would look a lot better. Because, this would be glass, of course, but you'd see a little bit more separation. I just thought it was a great casting. It's kind of like a regular everyday car, but they're hard to find. These are great. They're very drive very good. You can get a rear-wheel drive, all-wheel drive. 2-liter turbo 4-cylinder, or a twin turbo 6-cylinder 3.3 liter. So you can get a very heavy duty car. It's actually quite large. It's got a lot of space in it. A lot of technology. These are just cool cars. Genesis shares this platform as well. So the Hyundai Kia partnership. Basically the same company. But anyway, so all that new good suspension, nice engines, nice transmissions are on the car too. So it's really like getting a Kia Genesis. Alright, next we'll move on. Well, this is a really cool casting, and actually we're going to do a whole Land Rover casting update because I did find this one. Let's get the card for it real quick. Some of my other videos that I like the cards. It's always fun to have the reference of when it came out. So this is really cool. I love this casting. It's very recent to the scene. But I was thinking, I was like, I got a lot of Land Rovers from Hot Wheels, and it's all been very recent. Back in the day, it's really just Matchbox concentrating on Land Rovers, not Hot Wheels. So it's kind of cool to see one. So let's take a look at the new deco for this one. I think that's cool. It's got that, the light yellow color that Land Rover's famous for sporting. This really reminds me, if anybody really knows what this is, but there was a Camel Trophy. And they take these vehicles basically stocked with some additions, and they'd have to basically have teams. I don't know how many of it was, 5 or 10 or 12 or 20. I can't remember how many were participated, but all basically you were given the same amount of equipment, same number of people on each team, same vehicle, and then you were supposed to traverse 2 points on a map. And it wasn't just taking the highway. I'll put it lightly. You would have to basically traverse over impassable conditions. Basically no roads was the idea for the most part. And A lot of it was in the equator zone, so it was like a lot of jungle, a lot of mud, a lot of steep terrain, a lot of water crossings, just a lot of stuff like that. And basically whoever got there first won. I think that's how it worked. It was sponsored by Camel and Land Rover. Of course, you can't put cigarettes on toys anymore. Advertising for cigarettes on toys, so this just kind of does a Land Rover search and rescue. Now, they used 4 doors of these, like the wagon body style. So similar to this body. So this is more like a panel van, and we can compare it to the other one, which is sweet, the flat black, which obviously, I mean, that's really sweet too. But the contrasting yellow, I think, is great, and we can see they do the registration. Just to give you a little look here, metal base. I love it. Always a fan of Land Rover. Very classic. And I was alluding to her being on a big kick for Land Rover. I mean, look at all the castings we've got in the last year or two. We got panel van, pickup truck, crew cab, like the one in James Bond. Look at this thing. And this came out in a bunch of colors. This would be a great as a premium. And brand new to the scene, the last mainline we'll look at, the little Defender 90, which was a classic Matchbox casting. Now it's crossed over to Hot Wheels, and they're using their cooler tires, the really skinny tires, but the nice sidewall. They tampo it white, so I thought that was kind of cool. And they tampoed the fenders black. But basically the same vehicle, same scale. It's got a sunroof. So this will upgrade to a premium pretty good. It's basically the same vehicle. It looks like it's begging to be turned into a premium. Of course, that can't stop you from doing it right now. It would take to a custom pretty quickly. I mean, just needs a detail and you're there. It's got this funny back. It's like an emergency services back. Thought that was interesting. All right. So, we spent a lot of time on Land Rover. But who doesn't like this stuff? I mean, those are cool looking trucks. Alright, so we'll put the new stuff here so we can remind ourselves what we saw today. Alright. More premiums to come. So, the last of that from the series, because pretty much got everything except the Mercedes. We'll look at the Porsche later. It's actually in a different room now. We can look at that soon. I might do a Porsche roundup. Who knows? Alright. Let's get that back. So, yeah. This is the last one. This is noteworthy because I love the wheels, and I wanted to get a closer look at them. The casting actually is really cool. I did not buy the silver Fast and Furious one. But, I don't know. Something about this car is cool. It's basically a modified stocker Camaro. A lot of these would use the body, but the chassis would be completely gone through. It wouldn't really resemble too much of a stock Camaro. The tires are aggressive. It's a little bit more of a fantasy. I mean, they have made cars like this. Typically, they'll run this kind of body, but it'll be on like a stock car chassis. So it'll have like big wide tires, slicks, basically like that, and circle track, either packed dirt or asphalt. No run cars like this. But it looks good in off-road trim. But the wheels, they'll really lend themselves to, like, you can see the bead lock, the dish. They'll lend themselves good to like green light cars and auto world and stuff like that. So I'm going to keep my eye on that casting. Those wheels with the tires. I think that'll look good. All right. Old casting. I was surprised to see how old this was. We're talking about Chevrolet Nova. The Deuce. This is a 66 Chevrolet Nova. Basically, this car is like a 62 body, and it went to about, I think it was, 67. And then by late 67, it was a 68 model, I believe. It went to the Nova that we love. The 68 to the early 70s car, mid 70s. So this is the set, and I was able to find through my buddy the Grand National and the Lightning as well. So we'll look at that. The Impala, the bubble top car. A lot of people have seen that. I think the box art's great. But this came back from, if I remember, we'll look again in the camera. This car, 2006 casting. Interesting. Really big car. So Chevy Nova. They used to be also called Chevy 2. That's why we were calling them a Deuce. Chevy Deuce. This is a great car. Very, very highly favored by drag racing. The car can basically take any motor you want to put in it. And it will be very light. And it's actually a good wheel-based car. Long enough but not too short. And lightweight, so it, in its class, it does very good. This is kind of like how the Camaro was thought of. So in the Deuce, just like the Falcon kind of bred the thinking with the Mustang, these compact Chevys, they kind of help them design the Camaro and Firebird. And that program was kind of closely tied to this. I mean, they're not exactly the same, but basically you'd have a unit construction, but to make it a little bit beefier in the front and for better mass production, the clip on the car would be half a frame. So this frame would hold the engine and suspension together, and the doghouse and the core support for the radiator. And it'd get bolted onto this part of the car, which all this would be kind of like a unit construction, unibody. So the marrying of the two kind of made it cheaper to produce while still being durable, and it worked very well. And I can't remember if the Nova had that assembly too, but I know for sure the Camaro did, and Firebird. So again, very similar in size, but it's very huge in 1/64 scale. Looks good with the big wheels, but what's 1/64? So here's this Cadillac, for instance. You can see how big the Nova looks. And what does it say? We didn't look here. I think it says 06. Yeah. So, old castings, kind of when Mattel was pulling out of the craziness with the castings, because the technology, I'm sure, was getting easier for them to develop. So this is still very realistic looking. It's just the scale's huge. You can see how... And it's the gold paint. It was surprising. I took it out of the package. It's almost like a Spectra Flame. You can see the Zamac underneath. The tone of the silver, especially on that hood. So, it's a cool casting, especially for a Hot Wheels person. I mean, it's nice. So, and it's heavy. I mean, it's a big car. Let's take a little zoom on it. And its stance is right. Hot Wheels always has their stance pretty much spot on for the most part. Okay. There's a wide shot of my beauties. I mean, Hot Wheels can be really great. I love Greenlight and Auto World, but Hot Wheels are awesome. Especially recently. Okay. So, let's look at the Ford. Great truck. So this is something I remember because the first Fast and Furious, this truck was in it. So this is what he drove. And it was a 99 Lightning. First year for the second gen Lightning. And it was just as bad as ever. So in 99, they moved, it's a completely different truck. So I had a single cam, or I had an overhead cam. I don't know if it was a 32 valve. I can't remember. But anyway, overhead cam and motor. And the old one was a push rod. It's still a big engine. It's a 5.8 liter supercharged V8 truck. So mid 300 horse, and then they bumped it after '01, and it went up to 380 horsepower. So almost a 400 horsepower two-door pickup truck, rear-wheel drive, automatic transmission. Great truck. The first one was a 582, but it was a push rod 4-speed auto, two-wheel drive short bed, just like this. Hot Wheels did a really good job on this body style. This is not a body style that has been cast many times in the past. Hot Wheels has done it. I think Matchbox has done it. Johnny Lightning has done this body style. F-150. I think I've seen that. And maybe Racing Champions. Greenlight has not done that, and neither has Autoworld. So this is a really good one. I believe it's very close to 1/64 scale. It might be on the small side. We can probably get a short bed Chevrolet here real quick and see. So yeah, it's a little smaller. I mean, the F-150, this bubble one that they did, is kind of bulbous. This was after what Greenlight just did in the so up until 96. So 97 was the first year for this body, and then 99 was the first year for the Lightning, second generation. I think they did a great job. They rely heavily on tampo work. You know, not going to be separate lenses for the headlights or anything like that, but this truck had a lot of curves to it. The bumper looks really good. They kind of molded this bumper after the Cobra of the late 90s and early 2000s. So Cobra, Ford Mustang, new body style also was in 1999. And they had a bumper like this on that car for the Cobra. So the SVT, which was the outfit that did high performance Ford products. I believe it stood for Special Vehicle Team. I think that's what it was. And they did the Cobra development and the Cobra R, those type of things. They had a Focus at one point. They were running an SVT Focus. They had a SVT Contour, Ford Contour, which I think was a Ford Mondeo overseas. I think it was something like that. They had some funny ones. I think there was an Explorer SVT, or there might have been a Roush Explorer, but it had the Cobra rims on it. I remember looking at articles back then. You know, it's like, oh, wow, boys, like, I want an Explorer Cobra. And you could almost do it. You could put the Mustang drivetrain in an Explorer back then. It fit. I think they did a good job. They got the SVT badges. The bed liner's part of the interior, so it's like a plastic bed liner on a real truck. A lot of people I've seen on Instagram swap the rims. You know, there's maybe more accurate rims you can throw on this truck. These look okay. I'm not going to be able to touch this truck until I find more. These have been gobbled up. In the Midwest, the American vehicles, muscle cars are always the ones before the tuner cars. So it's kind of swapped. I think on the coast it's a little bit the opposite. Just depends on your geography, I guess. Alright, well, it's a good truck. I think it looks great. Hopefully I find more. You know. One can only hope. Can't get too upset if you don't find it, though. Because when you do find one, you're excited. Alright. Let's get on to a car that I've loved forever and ever. I actually couldn't go through my collection fast enough because I couldn't find it, but I'm talking about, of course, the Gray National. We're going to look at the new premium release. This is going to be an 87 Buick Gray National, a GNX. So this is a very, very highly coveted version of the Gray National. This car stemmed from the late 70s and early 80s development of turbocharging on General Motors vehicles, and they did it on a lot of vehicles. It wasn't just 4 cylinders. They were doing it on 8 cylinders and 6s. Buick concentrated on 6s. And they started with the T-type cars on their 3.8 liter pushrod V6, and then it led to, you know, I think it was a Riviera, and then it went to the Regal. So Grand National is based on the Buick Regal. This car actually came in all the body styles until it ventured into the 80s and the car turned basically down to a two-door only. But started life as a four-door, two-door, and a station wagon. They offered it. Up until the mid-80s, of course, they had to consolidate. General Motors was making one of every different type of body style on each platform. And they had Pontiac, Oldsmobile, Buick, Cadillac, and Chevrolet. So a lot of brands, and I might have missed one, but basically all the cars would be shared, and they would use sometimes different drivetrains, but a lot of common engineering. Well, this was the pinnacle of the G body. It started as an A body in the late 70s, and then it went to the G, even though it was basically the same vehicle, because A bodies turned into front drive cars, so they renamed this the G, and you'd have all sorts of cars produced on this platform that stemmed from it. Not all exactly the same, but all basically the similar engineering, different wheelbases, maybe different rear ends. You'd have a frame car or a subframe, can't remember which, solid axle, rear wheel drive, and these cars would have a pickup in the El Camino. They'd have a station wagon. They'd have two doors. This car was on the Monte Carlo. It was on the Buick Regal and the Oldsmobile Cutlass. It was on everything, basically, that General Motors did that was rear-wheel drive in the late 70s. They had full size and they dropped those. That was shared on the Caprice. So the GNX was a car that was completed by McLaren Specialties in Michigan. And it stemmed from a lot of development. What started as a carbureted, non-intercooled turbocharged, which is about as basic as you can get, went to a fuel-injected, sequential fuel injection, distributorless, so basically coil plug ignition, computer-controlled, with intercooler, 4-speed automatic transmission with lock-up torque converter, and you had a torque rod on the rear end where it would lift the car up and plant traction down to get a better quarter-mile time. So it had a very, very high development. One of the reasons it got killed off, not only because the G-body was being retired, but because it was actually a higher performer than General Motors' pinnacle performance vehicle, the Corvette. And so another reason that they put a nail in its coffin. They underrated the motor just like they had to do back in the late 60s and early 70s for insurance regulations. The car started out in the low 200s when it went to fuel injection. And actually, when it was carbureted, it was in the 150 to 180 range. So it climbed all the way up in GNX form. Incredibly. They underrated it. Advertised was 276 horse with 360 foot-pounds of torque, which was incredible back then. The GNX, really, when they dynoed the car, when it was in its correct trim, 300 horsepower, 420 foot-pounds of torque. This was in 1987. Most cars did 20-second quarter-mile times. 18 to 20 seconds was the average. A good fast car probably would do it in 17, 16 seconds. A good strong car. This car is doing quarter-mile times under 13 seconds, with the right conditions, of course. But pretty much just making the car running perfectly, getting a good traction conditions, and having a good atmospheric, basically at around a sea level temperature is where you want to run these cars. So, very quick. It was actually faster than the Ferrari in 1987 and the Porsche. So, this was just an old American car running that kind of horsepower. And so, of course, like all breakout stars, this one could not continue after 87. They got rid of it. A little over 500 of the GNX was made, but probably I think it went up to in the tens of thousands on the Grand National at some point. But there was a lot of special editions, this being one of them. They also offered the turbo and the blackout package on the Regal Limited, which is kind of something I forgot about. But you could technically have a blacked out Regal with a vinyl top, column shift bench seat car with this drivetrain in it. Not the highest spec GNX, but damn close. I mean, I think it was in the mid high twos. I think it was like 240 on the regular Regal turbo. So the Grand National before the GNX was probably in the 250 range on the horsepower, close to 300 foot-pounds. So still a very, very fast car. And total antithesis of the other two pony cars. The Camaro, really loud stripes and colors, and the Mustang, same thing. This car was blacked out in the 80s. It was very, very opposite of where all the design was going. So it's a special car for a lot of reasons. We'll take one last look at it, and then we'll move on to team transport. So you can see the GNX badge. So it was actually an up level on the Grand National. The vents were actually functional on this car. It added a strut brace here, as I was talking about, for better torque distribution when it launched. Bigger intercooler. It had a lot of upgrades. They did a great job with it. The only thing I think when I've noticed about this car, the hood looks a little short to me. They did have a longer hood, so it's slightly distorted. Also, there's very heavy tinted windows, so you can't really see the interior. But maybe the movie car looks like this. The main line that they do with this with the removable hood, I have not found it. I think it's in the collection somewhere. But basically that one is a kind of a total toyish vehicle. I wanted to see the difference between the two, but a lot of you probably have that casting. And so this is much more realistic, and I'd say the scale is pretty good. I'd say it's very close. I mean, this is an intermediate from the 70s, and that Dodge. So it's pretty close. It'll look good on the layout. I like the wheels, too. You know, if you took this casting and kind of put some stock wheels on it from Greenlight or something, it would look pretty close to a stock one vehicle. That's one car that they get into. I mean, Greenlight has done the Monte Carlo SS. It's only a stone's throw to try to do a casting on the Regal. Hopefully they get some Buick licensing for that. Okay, well, we're going to look at one more thing. This is a new casting to me. This transporter is like a Dodge cab, little Dodge cab, and a 70 Plymouth Superbird, which this is one of their older castings. It's kind of distorted in terms of it's really narrow, and the track on it's extremely narrow, but it's decent. The Union 76 colors are kind of cool too, so I like that. And I did have one of these mystery machines that I had found, I think recently. And it's identical. I wanted to see if they changed anything. They didn't. You know, they did do a metal base. But the colors are cool, and it'll look good with the other team transports. I'll take a little quick review of the car. Looks good with the Steelies. So Plymouth had their version of the winged cars. Of course, this huge wing was the Superbird, based off of the Roadrunner. And Dodge had their Daytona, which was another wing car, and that was based off the Charger and Charger 500, which they started with the 500 Charger. They smoothed the back glass and fleshed out the grill, but it wasn't enough. And so they said they threw the textbook out, and they said, let's put it basically an aircraft front end on the car and a huge wing for downforce, and let's just run this car. So they did, and again, when you race stock cars, quote unquote, stock vehicles, you have to have certain production numbers in real life. So they threw it together, they made it an option, and another car, and they sold it, and they got through, and eventually they got banned because it was a little too ahead of everybody else. And also the speeds on these cars were being very excessive to the technology of the time, and they were getting dangerous and things like that. So they kind of scaled it back, and cars got a little bit slower, but also a lot more closer racing too. And that's kind of how they altered it. So very controversial vehicles. And the other thing about that, if people don't know this, these cars, when they were selling them new in the dealership, they couldn't get rid of them. I mean, a lot of people just thought they were too wild to buy for the street. In many cases, they were. I mean, a lot of these cars had huge engines in them, so they had 440 as an option. They had a 426 Hemi, which is really heavy duty. And if you have one of those real, these cars are very, very high figure vehicles now. But yeah, no one bought them, so they were giving them away kind of when they were out in the 1970s. That's I thought that was funny. All right, let's take a look at the Transporter. Not too much to look at here. I like the tires on there. These Transports are very funny though. They're very um, they're like characters of real trucks. So they have a lot of cool features, you know, like details to them, but they're highly, highly modified. It seems more for fitting into the package than it does anything else. I'm very pleased, like when we went over the M2 Transporter, that that's a lot more realistic. So, but it's just a great looking piece, just because it's kind of like a characterization of a truck. But it's cool and looks good, and it'll look good as a centerpiece for the wing cars that I get. I do have a Daytona somewhere, but I don't know where I put it. Yeah, I guess she's not up here. Did I put it over here? Nope. Well, maybe next time we'll look at that together. I'm sure there's more wing cars in my future. Well, I did drabble on, but, you know, I tell you that Buick is a great vehicle. So, what can I say? We looked at some good ones. We got more cars to come. I have some other premium brands rolling in through the mailman as we speak. So, hopefully, we have more to come very shortly. Hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for all the great comments and subscriptions. Everybody take care of themselves. Happy hunting. Till next time.